used to, I wasn't very outgoing as a kid. And so when I got to college and I would have to start doing these like speeches, because I was a communications major, yep. I would do these. You too? Mm-hmm. So I would have to do a lot of public speaking, and it was a little intimidating for sure. But I also DJ'd on the side. So I had this thing where I would like close my eyes and just envision myself on like a big stage, like everybody's rolling balls, everybody's hammered. And then I like open my eyes. Now I'm like, are you ready to fucking party? And then like, boom, I'm like, hello, my name is Josh Irwin, and I will be talking about blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, oh, there's just 20 people in here. You guys are all losers. Go fuck yourselves.
I love it.
All right.
All right.
With that being said, welcome back, everyone, to Bunch of Podcasts. Again, I am Josh Irwin, your host this evening, along with my man Rafa Rusi. Rafa, how you feeling this evening?
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all.
I'm glad to hear that.
My family's coming back in a couple of days, which is very exciting.
Thank goodness. Can I look for days with fewer texts from you talking about this, that, the other thing?
Yes.
All right, we'll go back to being like friends with lives, not just like stepbrothers.
You can look forward to that. My wife, not so much, though.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it is Tuesday evening. Unfortunately, Cantina had to close this evening because we had a little bit of a water issue. The water got wiped out by the storm last night, the well, and got shot. And so we have to replace the well. But we will be back tomorrow, which for when you guys see this will be last week. So totally relevant and yet not relevant at all. But I'd like to welcome to our podcast this evening some very special guests of ours who have been grinding right out of our opposing window for 12 weeks now.
That's it.
So welcome Gene and Carli to Bunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Super happy to have you here. So these two have been, I'm excited for this podcast because Gene, we've spoken about a number of things over the past year and a half, 2 years. And I remember when you first brought this to, I don't know if it was my attention or someone else's, or we were having coffee talking about this. And I've been pretty full out in New Marlboro. But then on occasion I come downtown and I see, holy shit, he did it. So I'm assuming we have to give all the credit to Carli.
Of course.
But we'll hear about that this evening because you guys have been putting on quite the busking events here on Railroad Street. And although I have not gotten the full 9 to 5, see the whole thing through, I'm excited to hear what's been going on, what's been working, what hasn't been. But please tell me a little bit to start us off about yourselves. What's your background and what brought you here to the Berkshires?
Carli, why don't you go first?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I was born in the Berkshires, so I was here from my parents. I went to school at Siena College, and then I graduated in 2021, came home, was kind of looking for something to do here over the summer because I figured it would take a while to, get the post-college gig going. Found Berkshire Busk, and it just kind of hit all of my marks for something that would be fun to do in the summer just as a part of the production team. I met Gene. He saw that I had this English communications background, saw that I had done radio at Siena, and said, hey, we've been thinking about, doing live streams on our Instagram. Would you want to do that while you're helping us out this summer? I said, of course. And now I'm fully involved being general manager and helping Gene run the thing.
Where did you go to high school?
Taconic, up in Pittsfield.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, welcome back. Awesome. And did you have any experience with like performing arts and fun, wild stuff like you guys are putting on now before?
Oh, I mean, I was absolutely a theater kid,
Okay.
as embarrassing as that can be. And I had kind of continued doing that a bit in college. Like I was doing a work study in the theater. I started as a theater tech and then was doing a little bit of audio production. And I had also been doing some music journalism type internships. Like I had always been interested in, being around live music. My dad was actually a local musician around here in the Berkshires, well before I was growing up and a little bit when I was younger as well. So that was always part of being in the Berkshires to me was, going to these live gigs and checking out the people who live here.
That's awesome. And Gene, you've got a history that I don't think we have time to get into fully today. Writer, designer, this, that, the other thing. But give me the abridged version so we can talk about what you're up to these days, because you're like me, just on to the next one, my man.
So I started my sort of educational life thinking I was going to be a professional cellist. I went to high school. I grew up in New York area. I went to high school, regular public school, but I went to Juilliard on the weekends. And I was about a year or two behind Yo-Yo Ma. So I've known him since we were teenagers.
Wow.
And not well, but I know his name and I heard him play, and I knew maybe I shouldn't be a professional cellist because if that guy could play like that. But I went to Oberlin Conservatory in college, and I was somewhat entrepreneurial. And I did all sorts of entrepreneurial things. I ran the radio station, I ran a touring program, and I got out of that and got involved in the arts in New York City. And I was, for a time, the executive director of the American Symphony Orchestra, which is a symphony orchestra that performs at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center and tours. And so I had a lot of arts management experience. I then made a left turn. I went to business school, got an MBA, worked in corporate America, and really the beginning of what I would consider my entrepreneur's journey was when the internet got started. I started an internet company to try to put the arts on the internet, and AOL was our first investor. This was the early days of the internet before.
You've got mail.
You've got mail. We were running a tech company, and we were actually selling Broadway tickets on AOL before anybody even knew that it was a thing.
Wow.
So I got involved in the tech business, and I've now since then done essentially 2 or 3, depending on how you want to count it, tech companies. The most recent one was a company that provided ticketing, fundraising, and marketing software, back office software for cultural organizations, including the Mehewi here in the Berkshires and 600 or 700 other organizations like that. So I got out of the music performing business, and I transitioned to the management side and then became an entrepreneur, but all the while intertwining what I was doing in business with the arts.
Right.
And so I ran that business for the sum total of like 15 years. And ultimately, we exited that building to private equity company. I stayed on for a while. And all of that coincided with COVID. And after I essentially finished that stint, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? I built a house here 10 years ago in Great Barrington. I loved spending the summers here. I'd go to cultural events. And I was invited the summer of the first year of COVID. Richard Stanley at the Triplex didn't have any movies going, so he created that courtyard with tables and chairs, and he offered the opportunity for bands to play on the kind of veranda. And I got invited to sit in with one of the bands. And it must have been the end of August. The place was humming with people during a time when all the restaurants were closed. We're sitting there. It's a beautiful Berkshire evening. The sun is setting, and I'm playing in this band, and I'm thinking, this is magic. This is like, oh my God, my head kind of exploded. And then I'm being an entrepreneur. I'm like, wait a minute, maybe we can. So that was the inspiration for the whole thing.
You crack the cello. I'm sorry. What's the thing
bow?
called? No, yeah, you crack the bow, and you're like, I have an idea. It's time to get to work.
So what? And I'll add one tiny cap to that. At the end of that summer, I got a meeting with Mark Pruhensky, the town manager, and I sat down and I kind of described this idea, fully expecting him to say, well, there's a problem with this, and you're going to insurance, and the police, and this, and the select board.
So this wasn't your first time in the town hall?
So I expected that conversation, and Mark looked at me and he goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't you just do it? And me, I had already just run a business, and I'd been an entrepreneur where basically, a lot of people say the definition of an entrepreneur is that somebody that sees something that they would like to happen in the world, and they say, well, why not?
Yeah.
So he said that, and that's all I needed to hear. And suddenly we sort of whipped this thing out of nowhere. And obviously we got a lot of support from the town, from businesses, sponsors. A lot of the key people stepped up. And of course, for me, the great thing was that I got to meet all of these people. Everyone, Robin from Robin's Candy, and you, and Mark Firth. And so I suddenly became part of the community in a way that I had never been. Anyway, that's a longer answer.
No, not at all. But great slide in and seeing an opportunity, and all of a sudden, not just building it, but immersing yourself in it. And now I didn't even know your history, and I just thought of you as Gene, yeah, he's a GB guy, so good on you for for catching up real quick and setting yourself in there and being comfortable in that role.
Well, I've learned that when you put businesses together or any projects, you need a couple of key people that are going to put the wind at your back. And if you don't have that, then you feel like you're just pushing a big rock up a hill.
Or pulling.
You know this, right? So I felt like I had a couple of key people here that were supporters. Eric Bruin, for instance, at SoCo, I went to chat with him, and he just smiled and said, "What fun. Of course, you have to do this." And he sort of gave me the, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, enough so that it didn't stub my toe. And then the other big surprising thing was that this was a year ago, or more than a year ago, when we had no busker. I knew there were performers around.
Yeah.
Had no idea. The depth of the artists that were around, had no idea.
Yeah.
But we started to put some promotion up on Facebook. We spent a little bit of money, but a friend of mine got a band. And as long as this is going to be airing, there's a band called the Rollin' Rust. When are they coming back?
I guess for everybody else, it'll be last week, because they're coming this Saturday when we're recording.
Okay.
So look them up on YouTube. They did a kind of spoof song about applying to perform at Berkshire Busk. And we put it all over the internet. And then we're very close. I'm very close with the folks that are working with James Taylor. And the James Taylor team promoted the Berkshire Busk on the James Taylor Instagram, which has 250,000 followers.
Yep.
And we heard from we got 100 applications in like 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they came out of the woods, quite literally.
Literally. And it hasn't stopped. Like we get, I don't know, we're not even promoting it, and we get a couple of people a week now.
Wow. Okay, so take me back a little bit, and Carli, maybe this is a great place for you to hop in. Tell us, what is Berkshire Busk? Because for those that don't drive through Great Barrington between 5 o'clock when they start shuffling the cars off of Railroad Street to whenever the show ends, it's kind of like a poof, and you see the words, but you have no idea what's going on.
Right. We are a music and street performance festival. So what that means, if you were going through Great Barrington at this time, you would see musicians of all kinds. Like we've had violinists, people with guitars like you would expect, like flamenco dancers on the side of the road, jugglers, people twisting balloons. We just line up all these people all up and down Main Street and Railroad Street. And the whole concept is basically that they're out there playing for tips. We do give them a stipend, but the true nature of busking is just putting yourself out on the street for tips.
Well, that in and of itself is like hugely helpful, because again, I've been too absorbed in my own world to be paying attention to too many other things at the moment. But like now, the next time I come in to Great Barrington on a Friday or Saturday night, I'm gonna show up with a bunch of fives, knowing that like that's the goal. Like it's not like, oh, there's something going on, let's just go down there. But we should all be intentionally supporting these people, coming in with fives hot, and knowing that one here, one here, one here.
Of course, it's free to, we don't like put up barriers and charge entry to come in. Everyone's just spread out throughout downtown. We want you to walk around and, go into the restaurants and go into the stores and stop at our musicians. So by not having an entry fee, our hope is, that money goes to the community and the people who are coming and playing for us.
All right, so bring your cash the next time you come down to Great Barrington, team. All right, make sure that happens.
Now I'll add one addition to what Carli just described, which is that on this as an additional experiment this summer on Railroad Street on Saturday nights, we decided to expand the concept of busking to actually create 2 fixed stages on either side, and sandwiched between them, we invited vendors to come and sell everything from cookies to carved soap to all of the stuff that you find at art fairs. And so Railroad Street on Saturday night from 6:30 to 8:30, actually all the way till 10 o'clock, is like a block party. We have a band starts in lower, and then they go up towards Mooncloud and they play, and then they switch back and people walk around, and it is just, the vibe is incredible. We did it the first weekend, which was the 10th of July or something.
Yep.
Now when we were raising money, for the festival this year, we had a presentation and we just grabbed a picture off the internet of a street fair with booths. And we said, here's our inspiration. And we actually pulled it off. And I looked at Carli and like, this is it.
Yep.
This is it. This is just what we wanted. So that's what I would encourage folks. Like if you walk by and you see these blow up arches, those are our stages. And we've got vendors selling stuff. And it's just a great energy. And then people stay on Railroad Street. We have musicians playing until 10 o'clock at night. We have people singing on the street almost every week. It's a fantastic feeling.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm curious to know, you seem to have, and as you said, you have some people giving you some wind in your back, but you seem to have had a pretty quick turnaround from idea to actuality. And I've even noticed because last year was the first year, right?
Yep.
Right. And so last year was a little bit more spread out. It was more pop things going on. And now it feels much more concentrated. And definitely I can see that same image of a street fair in my head. I mean, my New York City days, if you were walking down the street and the street was closed and you saw the guy with sausage and peppers in the window of his little trailer, I was like, yo, we are taking this street and helping ourselves to a good time.
Yep.
So you've kind of gotten there very quickly. And I'm curious, like, what were the things that really helped you speed this process up? I mean, it's pretty advantageous just to get it going. Where did it all kind of come together? And did you feel like there was a stop point? And where do you feel like you are as far as on the path towards that final goal?
I guess I would say, I'll give you two answers and Carli could weigh in on this too. When I conceptualized this, it almost, I don't know how, honestly, it was a subconscious thing that say, oh, we're going to have a bunch of these groups and let's have a program guide and let's have these and let's have a kids day. And I don't know where it came from. Many people said to me, well, how did you know how to do this? And I don't think it was conscious. It was just now, there were many things that we did last year that we said, oh, we'll never do that again. Like, for instance.
Like what? Yeah, I want to know.
For instance, you'll love this. So we have these sandwich boards that have our sponsors' logos on them. And last year, we thought, well, we need to get people to know where the busker locations are.
Yeah.
Well, how are they going to see that? The only way to do that is to have helium balloons. So why not get helium balloons and then attach them to the sandwich boards so that when you look down the street, you see these helium balloons floating in the air? Well, that sounds like a great idea. First of all, finding helium in Great Barrington, not so easy. We had to make a deal with Car Hardware. They had to get it from Pittsfield. We had to get them to stay open late.
Or Carli's walking around either popping 40 balloons at 10 o'clock at night or getting mobbed by at least 60 kids when you know that there is not going to be enough balloons that everybody
So is
can
that
hear.
what that shooting report was last year from that weird night at Moon
So,
Club?
we didn't, when you say, oh, by the way, could you go blow up 30 balloons? I mean, we didn't do the balloons again because it was like a great idea that came from somewhere. But to answer your question, like I don't know where it came from. I don't know where the idea of the vendor, it just seemed like a natural thing. How did it come together so quickly? I think that the idea sort of came very quick. I didn't fully comprehend, and this is part of my own sort of the way I work. I never really think that things are as hard to do as they actually are, usually by a factor of 2 to 1. Like, I have the idea. I'm like, oh yeah, this will be no problem. But I allow myself to have the idea, right? And then later I cut it down, but I allow myself to think of, and that's what happened with this. It's like, oh, we're going to do this and this and this and this. And then later, and then this year, we're like, okay, we're not going to do the balloons. And there's some other, but that's part of it. I would say the other part of it, to kind of the dark side, is that last year from, I would say, the middle of, there was a moment where I started raising money. This was a year ago in January of that year. And it was January, February, and March as I was raising money. I was COVID, so there was nothing in person. I was calling and email people that I didn't know, that didn't know anything about who's this guy with this crazy idea.
Oh, that's how we met the first time. It was an email followed up with a Zoom call.
Yes,
you
yes,
know, and
yes.
which was exactly that. Just like out of left field, being like, not quite sure what's going on here, but let him run.
Right.
I have the idea.
So I did all of that, but there was a moment of truth, and it came at about March, where I had raised, like half of what I thought we would eventually need, but we had to commit. Like, are we doing this or not? Because we had to start getting a team together. I had to get buskers, all of that stuff. So basically, I made the decision, and it would have been March of 20, like, okay, we're going to do this. And then I don't think I slept a full night from that middle of March till easily the end of June. Like, I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh my God, I didn't think about this. And what about this? And because we're doing everything for the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, we have to get a poster. Oh, we have to get a designer. Oh, we have to get a website. Oh, who's going to build the website? Who's going to do the email? It was overwhelming. But of course, having been an entrepreneur, like, you just grind through and you do the work. So
Yeah, I can vouch for that because I remember I found the position for like getting involved with Berkshire Busk on Indeed. I think I applied at 7 o'clock at night on a random day, and I woke up to an email from him at 3 in the morning asking if I could meet with him at like 2 p.m. that day for an interview.
Classic. Right. How's coffee tomorrow? Postmark today.
yes. And I had friends that stayed with me. Some friends came up from New York who stayed with me. I guess it was the week or two before we started last year, so it would have been mid-June. And I was up at like 5:30 in the morning, and they stayed with me, and they got up at 8, and I had already been working for like 2 or 3 hours, and they looked at me and they said, what are you doing? What is going on? Now, I will say a year later, we're in a much better place, but being, as but for starting anything, it is a 1% inspiration and then 99% just
Hard work,
all of that.
So you now have this, what I feel like I want to call bigger infrastructure for this year. It just feels like things are more official. It's more grounded and whatnot. And it's starting to look like what it is that you're envisioning and what your goals are. How are you maintaining like feedback, and how are you gauging what the response is in order for you to make, because I know immediately just by the fact that you talk about waking up and freaking out about things that we speak the same language and like got to get to the final destination, like can't be living in halfway land. So I guess the question is twofold. Number one, from the community at large, being the people that are walking up and down the streets, and number two, from the people that have been here, like on the street, the business owners. It's so cool that Eric, and I know a lot of people immediately got behind you, but what have been the ways that you're actually knowing, are we on course?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, we've had people out on the streets, in terms of just getting a view from the public. We've had people taking surveys. We probably get somewhere between 10 and 20 surveys a night, twice a week. So, we've known that, the feedback has been really positive this year, and that a bunch of people, as opposed to last year, are now saying that they're coming into town specifically to come see us.
That's great.
Yeah, and I can give you some data. I'm not totally prepared with the data, but I will say that one of the key questions in the survey, and we have now over 300 surveys, so it's a pretty good sample.
Yeah.
Just under 40% we say, how did you end up at Berkshire Busk? And, it could be I'm coming for dinner, I'm shopping, I just happened to be. 40% say, I specifically came because I heard about Berkshire Busk.
That's great.
Which is a great number for us. Then the other questions that we've been asking are you planning to spend money when you're here on dining and buying stuff? 90% say yes. And we're asking, like, on average, how much do you think you're going to spend? And the numbers are somewhere, I don't have the real data, but it's like $50 to $75. So what we know is, if you take the total number of people that we think will come for the whole summer, which I think that number is going to be north of 5,000 people, probably maybe as many as 10. And you take 40% of that and you multiply it times the dollars they say they're going to spend, we're creating real economic activity.
Yes.
And that was part of the thing. So, but we also know, because we ask a question, and it's a leading question for sure, and I should give some credit to Ann O'Dwyer. at Simon's Rock who teaches there, and one of her skills is in marketing research. And I have an MBA in marketing, so I know a thing about that. We ask a question that says, to what degree does Berkshire Busk improve your perception, how you feel about Great Barrington? 90% of the people say a 4 or a 5.
Yeah,
so
thumbs
what
up.
we know to the public is like they come here and like, what a cool town. And we also know from the comments, because we put it in an empty box. So we get a lot of positive feedback, and these are random. Like nobody signs up. We just walk up to somebody and say, would you do the survey? So that's...
Yeah, Simon's Rock students come down and do surveys for us, and volunteers will as well.
So that's how we're getting the feedback. Now, funny that you should ask about the sort of the infrastructure. We had a kind of a planning meeting this morning with a bunch of somebody from the select board, the town manager, a bunch of the retailers. Basically, I started the meeting by saying, look, should we do this again? Is it working? And if so, why? And of course, I'm always asking myself, are we doing as much? But the feedback we got from them was extraordinarily positive. Richard Stanley, who's been in this community for 40 years. Forgive me, Richard, if I get it wrong.
Yeah.
But Richard always tells the stories like it used to be at 8:00 on a Saturday night, this town would be completely shut down. And now you come on a Saturday night and there's people out on the street and it's alive.
Yeah.
And so I think people really, one of the goals was to create a space for everyone to come together. Mm-hmm. You don't have to pay a ticket price.
Right.
You can just come. You don't even have to buy anything. You could just come and enjoy.
Yeah.
We see parents with kids. I'll tell you, one of the biggest innovations of the year, and this came from our survey, chalk.
Oh yeah, I've seen kids going wild with it.
Chalk.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like catnip for kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I had
This episode is brought to you by Chalk.
Chalk.
Catnip for kids.
We had no idea, but what chalk does is and all we do is we put 6 or 8 pieces of chalk in a little plastic bin on the ground. Don't say anything to anybody. And a half an hour later, there's 20 kids on the street. The parents are sitting and chatting with each other. They're listening to the music. The kids are busy. Mm-hmm. It's fabulous.
Well, I'm so glad this is going well for you, and I want to say thank you because Rafa and I started this podcast after having coffee together one day and just being like, why can't more cool shit happen? Right? Am I wrong?
Perfect description of our conversation.
We're like, why can't more cool shit happen? And we were saying that as adults, as men, as community members, as parents, and just trying to think about like what, you go up to Burlington and you go up to Portland and there feels like there's activity, there's energy, there's entertainment, there's culture. And we just felt like everything was a little flat. And I think you went ahead and took a street that has an enormous amount of history, an amazing community behind it, but still felt flat. And you gave it some third dimension.
Well,
which is awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Which is awesome. And I love to see just the wheels turning and so many different. I mean, it's not just musicians anymore. In fact, who's coming this week? Harold McGee. What's his name?
Wacky Chad.
Wacky Chad, who's a stunt pogo stick act and he performs at Faneuil Hall. One of the great things I should mention is that we kind of got discovered by the Faneuil Hall professional buskers. These are magicians, aerialists, acrobats, circus performers. I mean, I was tipped off to get in touch with a couple of them, and they all talked to each other. And they're like, let's go check out this Berkshire Busk. And all of them, 100% of them, they're all coming back this year, each one different week. We had Darren Young here 2 weeks ago. And these people bring the level, I mean, they are pros. And so that's the other level of street performers. When you get a real professional street performer, it's just amazing to see what happens.
When are we going to see the tightrope rock across from one side of Railroad Street to the other? I'm happy to volunteer my building, as landing zone. Actually, you know what? I want to be the takeoff. I don't want to be the landing zone.
Do you want to do it yourself? I mean, we're in the market for more talent.
I mean, I got good balance, but not like that.
Speaking of talent, I was going to ask both of you
Yeah.
if Have either of you or both performed yet? And if not, why and when will we see?
Yes. Yes. Great question,
Because
Rafa.
you both have, you have your theater background and everything, and you're a musician, so
Break out the
that'd be pretty
cello.
Cool.
This is a much better question for Gene than me. There is a reason why I have placed myself behind the scenes.
No, the lights are shining.
Just because you did it doesn't mean that you're good at it.
That's a good quote. Write that one down. Put that in my personal quotes. All right.
So
Yeah.
the Carli's backed me into the corner. The truth is that I've befriended a band leader here in the Berkshires by the name of Marianne Palermo. She has a band called First Take, and it is that band that I sat in with on the veranda of the triplex. So Marianne is playing on the last weekend, and she's been bugging me to sit in with the band on our last weekend, which will be September 3rd, Saturday night. So I'm thinking that might be my debut on Railroad Street.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Let's promote the hell out of that, Rafa. Let's make there be a huge
I'll
turnout.
literally come in with a camera and shoot it. It's going to be fabulous.
That's awesome. All right, what else do we got here? I wanted to know what the future goals are. And again, seeing we now have a nice collection going on of a variety of different assets. I also want to know, in your words, what the definition of busking is, because I remember the first time we chatted, I was just like, I still don't know what you want until we actually sat down and spoke about it.
Yeah.
So tell me that first, and then tell me what busking in 2023 is going to look like for us.
So the traditional definition of a busker is a street performer that performs for tips. And it's a tradition that you will find in Europe quite wide. There is a real tradition of street performers in more than in the United States, actually also in Australia and New Zealand. It is not as widespread here in the United States. So definition of busking, as long as you're out on the street performing and you have a tip jar, and you'll see the Faneuil Hall ones, they are professionals at getting tips. They know better than anyone how to ask for a tip and get people to give them tips. So that's what busking's about. I mean, I'll give my answer to this. I mean, it's funny that we're doing this session today, because we just had a meeting this morning all about thinking about the future. And two things I think come to mind. One is, it's hard for me to conceptualize, like, we're only in year 2. It is, in many ways, it's still an experiment. And on some level, there are things that we already know this year that we want to do differently next year, but we got to wait till next year.
Yeah.
So really, it won't be until a year from now that we'll know if the things that we're thinking about now get fixed. So it needs time to develop. And I think we've definitely gone from one level to another. We've done incredibly well. I think that, my answer, I think I'll give you two answers. One is we are striving to, I don't want to say operationalize, but we're learning what it takes to pull this event off. And we need to figure out how to staff it. You know this.
Yeah. Right. I can see it in both your eyes when you said that. You're like, it can be done at our own cost.
which this year it is being done at our own cost. And I'll give you a great example of how great this town is and how the wind is at our back. So the first weekend that we had the 2 stages and the arches and everything, I mean, Carli looked at me in the middle of the thing, and she looked at me and she's like, Gene, this is not sustainable.
Nope.
Right?
Usually we have those talks in the walk-in.
Yeah. And I went home and I thought, yeah, we're way over our head. And so I immediately put out the call, like, we need more bodies. We need more people. We need runners. We didn't need that before, but we needed people around. And I just asked everybody. And I called Eric Brun, and Eric's like, you know what? At 5:30 at night, when you guys are setting up, is my lowest sales hour of the night. I have a whole team of people waiting for the onslaught. I'll just give you 1 or 2 of my staff members for an hour.
That's fucking awesome.
That's awesome.
I'm like, oh my God. Like, right? So that's the kind of stuff.
Yeah. Hey, Billy, call Eric from SoCo for help with juicing at 4:00.
So, so there's an operational thing. Like, we'd like to get this to run more efficiently, and we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I'll answer this, and then Carli can give her point of view. But we want to. The word experience came up today in our meeting, and I think that we want to make it even more of an experience. When people come to Great Barrington, yes, they drive by, they go, what's going on? But we want special stuff to happen every week, something that you didn't expect, some person go around the corner, oh my goodness, did you see that? And we want to sort of expand the width, the breadth of the kinds of performers that we had. I mean, we had Buddha the Great.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Was awesome. And then we had a
that.
flamenco dancer, and then we had a modern dance company. And then we had a guy doing clown and circus act. So we want to sort of expand the creativity of it and do sort of more and more so that people basically, and this was really the very first pitch that I put together for Berkshire Busk. The first sentence said, we want Berkshire Busk to take its place alongside Tanglewood and Jacob's Pillow and climbing Monument Mountain as a thing that you have to do in the summertime in the Berkshires. Like
Preach.
that's the goal.
Yeah.
So
Preach.
that was my. So Carli, what's your add to that?
Yeah.
It's like a day off.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? No, but yeah, I think just generally just the idea of making sure that it remains fun. I mean, not only for everybody and for finding new ways to make it innovative and not just having it kind of blend into the background as one of those things that just happens here, making sure that it's still something that grabs your attention when you come down to Great Barrington, and also making sure that it's still fun for us by making it sustainable, because it is fun to put on an event like this. Like,
Sure.
Besides maybe that one particular Saturday where I looked at Gene and said, I can't do this every week. I always leave, these events in a better mood than when I showed up to work, which I think is rare to say.
Yeah. Well, that means you're doing something good.
Yeah.
If you find something you love to do, you never have to work another day in your life. And I'm glad you guys are on that pursuit, and hopefully we'll continue that. So talk to me about food a little bit, because you mentioned like some vendors in the streets, and that's something that we've certainly talked about, not on this podcast, but has been a murmur of conversation in the Berkshires and Great Barrington for a long time, of why don't we have more hyper local, hyper small businesses? Why don't we have more pop-ups? I mean, the first thing I've seen ever is the hot dog stand.
Yeah.
Which, like, that to me tells me we're moving in the right direction. The fact that you can get a hot dog in the street. Now, we don't necessarily need the nuts for nuts guy on the corner, and
Why
this.
not?
I mean, I'd be down for a nuts. You're looking for a new job, maybe, right? You're nuts.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
And I know that the history of adding these things in is that the local businesses that are paying substantial rent for some of these locations, myself included, full disclosure, are like, we don't want food trucks,
Right.
because that's going to take business away. And I see both sides.
Yep.
I see from the business side of like, look, we're here, we're drawing our crowd, that's fine, whatever, we do our business. But as you said, the data doesn't lie. More people are coming down. Are they thirsty? Yes, they are. They're going into Mooncloud. They're certainly going to Baba Louie's. Bizen, I don't think, has ever done this kind of business in the 30 years.
And by the way, last year, before Mama Lo's opened, last year in particular, that courtyard in the background was kind of sleepy.
Yeah.
We know that because our headquarters is right there.
Yep.
This year, once you've got a takeout barbecue place, the place is hopping all day long. So keep going with your question.
No, so I'm curious, what are the vendors, and what has that been like, kind of negotiating with the town and also the local businesses to kind of find a sweet spot? Because I think that that's amazing. And you think about the farmers market is such a great event, and it's once a week for this period, and then once we hit fall, once a month, whatever it is. And one thing I want at the farmers market is more food options. I mean, the farms are great, but we're also so lucky to have access to great food so often, and especially during COVID, the farm stores popped off. So now everybody is getting local produce every single day from their farm store. But what I want in this greater scheme of the Berkshires being this food destination is I think we need to have less barriers to entry and have more availability. And you speak of Mama Lo's, and the first time I met Buddha was at a gas station. That was where they were before. Right. And I was driving to go play golf, and I saw smoke, and so I pulled over and got into a conversation. We have a bunch of mutual connections, blah, blah, blah. A year later, here he is popping up business. That's how I think we get great cultured foods into our neighborhood. That's how we're going to get a great Vietnamese place. That's how we're going to get a great Arepas place, is because they were there in the streets making them, because so many great cultures, cuisines, and food options start in the streets.
Yeah.
But it's been challenging. So I'm curious to know, A, what are the groups that you've had come in? I want to be helpful in finding the next thing to pop up, because I think what a great story would be if someone said, we got invited to do a stall at Berkshire Busk. We got great feedback. Our home takeaway business started to pop up. Next thing you know, we're opening a retail location.
So it's so funny you bring this up. So first of all, I want to do a shout out here to Liam Gorman, who runs a company called CosQuest up in Pittsfield. I met Liam because he does these sort of scavenger hunts in stores, and he is this very innovative. He's got an app where people run around, and he's really local supporter. And I got introduced to him through Robin at Robin's Candy, and Robin said you should meet this guy. And so Liam single-handedly is managing all of the vendors. I mean, we engaged him over the winter, and Liam, we said to him, we've never done this before. Do you think you could pull this off? And we let a couple of weeks go by, and we asked him to create a spreadsheet of the vendors and the weeks and whatever. And we had our first meeting with him, and he's like, well, the first week we have 10, and the next week we have 12, and the next week is 5, but I think I'm going to get, I looked at this and I'm like, you get 10 vendors on the first week? So Liam has done a spectacular job. We have not brought food vendors. There's one vendor that was selling bear butter. I think those guys in Pittsfield that talk about a crack cocaine for adults. Oh my God, that's so good. So good. And there's a woman that makes little profiterole, little cookies. But we actually did have conversations about food over the winter, and you're a professional in this area. We kind of started rolling our eyes when people started talking about cooling, power, spoilage, food. Like our heads started to spin, and then we're like, okay, for this year, let's just do hard goods. The artwork and carved, that kind of stuff. The food thing, we kind of need a food professional, and we also need to navigate the restaurant situation, because remember that part of the goal here was to fill up the restaurants.
Yes.
And so we don't want to basically do that and then say, oh, but by the way, we're taking you. So it's a delicate balance.
Sure.
I think we can eventually get there, but we need some expertise in this area, because that was definitely a bridge too far when we started thinking about that. We were talking with Chris Hale over at the Miller, who's terrific, and he's very open-minded. He's like, well, we could do this and this. And then the reality of food is a lot different than a busker, and it's a lot different than selling T-shirts.
Yeah. But to me, like having some food options there that are quick and easy, and I don't know if it was even like the Christmas walk or something that Baba Louie's was selling slices outside. And like that was such a cool thing, because it would be one thing if there were 10 restaurants on Railroad Street. Right. And I always, when I'm making my vision of what you guys are trying to do is a combination of that New York City street fair paired with, I don't know what the street is in Burlington, but there's a pedestrian only street in Burlington that's packed with restaurants and shops. And if you go to one of the restaurants, you're like, hey, table for two. And they're like, yeah, cool. Let's get your number. It'll be at about an hour and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Which, by the way, when you went the other day for Baba Louie's, how long did it take?
Yeah, it was about an hour to do their takeout.
Right. So that's great. That means, and I know this from the business side, that businesses are actually overwhelmed at this point.
Yes.
And nothing would be better for the businesses in Great Barrington to have 2 more restaurants where it is humming and you're popping into one place. Oh, okay. And it's okay if you're on a wait list. I have a lot of problems with people making 5 reservations for a given Saturday night and then choosing moment of where they want to go, because that hurts. Yeah. But it's another thing to be on the wait list for 5 different restaurants, and somebody texts you, and then when you get the text from the other place, you're like, hey, sorry, we're great to the next person. So I think the business threshold is one thing to consider, and checking in with the restaurants and saying, hey, how is busking? It's obviously creating more of a buzz in town. Are you at a good point?
Right.
Is it too much? If we were to add in a couple of other options or even snacky options, don't even go full slice of pizza, but popcorn is the lowest end of that.
Right.
But something to be noshing on, but I would love to see a couple of new, haven't tasted yet kind of things that are coming about. Mostly because that's my path to more great restaurants.
Honestly, like what I love about this conversation, and we really haven't thought about this, is
because it's such a different conversation than we were having when the festival was first starting, which is, my God, nobody's coming out onto the street. How can we get people to show up?
But you've now captured the audience.
There's way too many. How do we go from here?
And how cool, I'm thinking from a promotion point of view. Like I once went, I don't remember where it was. It was on the other side of the Hudson for like one of those festivals. It was an artichoke festival or a something festival, and right, and like tons of people and vendors. Like it never occurred to me, but we could do, if you wanted to do an arepa weekend, or if you wanted to do a Vietnamese food, like it could be a way to promote the busking event. Yet another idea. Like I was saying earlier today, keep being creative, keep coming to reasons. Like adding a food element would be really interesting. And again, like we're going to rope you in to help us conceptualize this, and then help us really think about it and think about pitching it, because we want it to be a win-win. And I think you're entirely right. The restaurants, our perception is that many of the restaurants are on Saturday night in particular, they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, overwhelmed, and especially in a world that every restaurant is understaffed. So you're kind of
right.
The supply and demand is totally fucked in that you have more customers than ever before. You're desperate for the money because you're like, cool, we're coming out of a terrible time. We'll take it.
Yeah.
And yet, let me tell you, whatever that face was that you had on that one particular night is what most employees in restaurants are feeling on a nightly basis.
Yes.
Nightly basis, just worn out, depleted.
No, look, I
exhausted.
was at Mooncloud late on last Saturday night, and I was chatting with one of the servers who said to me, "Well, our busser didn't come today, and like we're just dying here."
Yeah.
Because all it takes is one person not to come, and the whole thing is out of tilt.
And by the way, like with this whole conversation, I think this is one of the reasons why the Busk has been going so well, is that, Gene in particular has been so good about even talking to our staff saying, listen, we're just starting this. Like, we're not assuming that we know the best way to do this. If you have ideas, let us know. Like, we got the chalk from a survey. Like, we've run things differently because our staff has suggested that we run things differently.
What about starting with I never like to add another thing to the to-do list for busy people.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you started with the local businesses that have some offering, saying, we now, the town is now permitting you to go ahead and serve something off the street. And so like this pizza by the slice. So Baba Louie's now has a pizza by the slice. And that then cuts their need to fulfill table service over and over and over again tenfold. Great, we've now done that. Mooncloud can go ahead and serve poke bowls in little cups or whatever.
Sure.
And
who the people that are listen,
hand rolls out of BZN.
100% right. And also, actually Eric Brune did this because they have a standalone refrigerator, and they put the refrigerator out on the street with pre-made cups.
Yeah.
And they're like, you don't want to wait on the line? But anyway, let's brainstorm about this.
Yeah.
We got, we're going every weekend now through September 3rd. So everybody that's listening, come.
Yeah.
And then after that, let's start brainstorming about this for next year, because that's exactly the way this project is going to grow.
Yeah.
And it's going to bring more and more people. To go back to the busking, the thing that makes buskers most happy is they get tips. And the only way to get tips is if people are here. And I feel personally, one of the other great things about the festival is the performers that we've met. so many of them. They're just so great. They're just so great people. They're so like that.
Yeah.
For me, when the night is over, I've met these great, and they're grateful that they've performed. And then you see them perform, and they're awesome. I feel personally a little guilty when somebody's performing and they only have 2 or 3 people, and I'm like, oh God, we invited them here, and it's a festival, and they're not. They're only. So we, in order to make it worthwhile for everyone, the more people that come downtown, the more people that are standing around, it all feeds on itself, pun intended.
Yeah, nice. Out of curiosity, what is the range that you're telling people that they could make in tips, or have you gotten any feedback? Are performers that have performed once being like, sign me up, I'm coming back?
Oh my goodness. So first of all, we just this past week, we did a survey of all of the buskers that have performed this year so far. We'll do another one at the end of the year. I don't know the number. It says, what's the likelihood that you would want to come back next year on a scale of 1 to 5? I think 97% were 5.
Yeah.
Great.
Like they all want to come back.
Great.
Great. I mean, I will say that we don't. I feel it's a little invasive.
That's fine.
To ask No, I don't mean the question.
Oh.
I feel that it's invasive for me to ask the buskers, like at the end of the night, how'd you do? But I will say that there's a very talented, I won't say her name because I'm going to say numbers, but there's a very talented young performer who was at the Triplex Barrington Courtyard one night, and awesome, terrific performer. And she came to me the next day and she said, I got $250 of tips. And I'm like, wow. Most people don't tell me, but you can make a decent amount of tips, and those are all in 5s and 2s and 1s.
Yeah.
So people will show the love, but they have to be there to see it.
Yeah.
I will say too, there's been at least 2 performers who have, we only really hear the good things
Right.
from them, thankfully, but we had at least 2 performers write in and go, hey, at this location tonight, someone tipped me $100 bill, so anytime you want me to go back there, I'm more than happy to.
Yeah.
Right. The $100 tip is not unheard of in this town.
Yeah.
No, it is not.
Yeah.
And you know why? Because we have a very interesting community of people at both ends of the spectrum. And I love nothing more than when my customers who are very wealthy say, tonight's meal was worth so much more than what you charged me.
Yeah. Nice.
And I want to make sure that your entire team knows how grateful I am to have this in my backyard.
Wonderful.
I mean, because we Rafa and I don't know, were we working last week when we were talking about this? We were wondering if you could, no, we were swimming actually. Swimming at a friend's pool. And we were talking about, wouldn't it be cool if you could have a local price and then a non-local price? Because I joined the country club, right? I joined Wyandotte last year, and I got in at a great rate because I live within 10 miles, so like permanent location was within 10 miles. But if you're a weekender, it's like 10x on what I pay.
Yeah.
And I was like, wouldn't that be cool for restaurants where there is a clear difference? And we spoke about it with Matt, who said, we offer a 20% discount to farmers because I feel like it's wrong for me to have a business that I can't, that people that make food can't afford the food that I sell. He's like, and I wish I could do more, but like that's a hard line. And I'm in the same boat and that's part of the reason why we do the tacos and the regular service to be like, look, you got a family, come on down, no problem. Look, the regulars, come on out on a Sunday. Like we'll be there for you. And they're there for us year in and year out. But the attention and the tourism and the boosting economy that we have going here is great on paper. But how do we really, I can't charge $35 for a burger.
Right.
And do you know what people would say about me if I tried to charge $35 for a burger? But you know what? Half of the people that come to Cantina would happily pay $35 for a burger. So how do you make that discrepancy? And
look, it's an age old. I mean, Danny Meyer wrote a book about this, right? I mean, it's there's no right answer except for experimenting.
Yeah.
But I think for me anyway, the big interesting thing about this conversation in particular is I really never thought about the angle of food as another vector to bring people to an experience. And, I've gone to all those street fairs in New York and I've done all that and it's so fun. And so I would really like to explore how we could make that work. And maybe that's something that Liam can help us with, or you could help us. But I would love to brainstorm it, because it would add another layer of interest to the festival. It'll bring more people in. It certainly will. I think you're right that it may very well help some of the restaurants deal with the demand.
Yeah, the pressure is intense.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Carli, Gene, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. If anybody who's listening to this has any questions or wants to hop in, whether they're a busker or want to be a part of the fundraising or want to be a part of potentially food, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
We have a website, which is berkshirebusk.com. Also, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok at Berkshire Busk.
BUSK.
Berkshire Busk. busk.com. We'd love to hear from you, and listen, thanks to you both for this. Has been really super fun.
This is great. Thank you.
That's what we want to do, stimulating conversations with interesting people about our community. So you guys checked all the boxes. Thanks you
so much.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Reminding everyone that we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts, and YouTube. Even though had some technical issues last week, I fixed it.
And make sure to start sharing. If you appreciate what we're doing, please start sharing it around. I want to see a lot of reposts, retags.
That's right.
I want to be walking down the street and hear some hoorahs if we can.
Please do leave us some nice reviews if you can on Apple Podcasts in particular. That helps a lot. And we'll be back next week. Bye bye.
Shalom.